So I did a video, I guess it was last week. It might have only been a couple days ago at this point, on North Korea and what was going on, and about the reports about Jong Un being either completely incapacitated or dead, and just basically what that meant and what things were going to look like, or I should say, really what the things we should be looking out for are. Strangely enough, there's been no major sweeping moves in North Korea since we've heard this happen. I would expect things to be rolling, us to be hearing about coups and executions and China doing stuff, and we'd be getting some sort of information. We really haven't gotten anything, which it doesn't mean nothing's happening, because you guys know how shadow fights go. But uncharacteristically quiet, let's just say, for something that is this important. And then 2 days ago, the president tweets, "Kim Jong Un is in good health. Don't underestimate him." Okay, he knows this is true. Like this flew completely under the radar, and the fact the media wasn't talking about it is telling, to say the least. I believe him when he says this. There's absolutely no reason for him to lie about this. They had said this before, actually. Now, that was the official State Department position. It's just that, internationally they were saying that this other stuff was going on. So the news kept reporting essentially contradictory to what the State Department was saying. And I guess I made the mistake of believing what the news was saying, because it was coming from so many different sources. And here the State Department held steadfast. Basically, they said it's under control. Whatever that meant. And now the president basically says, no, Jong Un's alive. North Korea's fine. Don't worry about it. That's telling. So, is that misinformation? Is Jong Un actually in North Korea? Because they pretty definitively showed that some of his public appearances recently were body doubles. With high-resolution cameras, you can really only hide so much. And, he had, not unlike other dictators, he had body doubles. But he also was sick, and he was in surgery, and that messes with your appearance. So you usually come out of that usually more pale and skinny and stuff, and this body double was obviously he just looked like almost a fatter version of him. So whatever's Jong Un's being treated for, I suspect he's going to look a little different when he comes out. Not that he's going to have plastic surgery or anything, but he'll look like a man who's going through surgery. If you look at somebody like Dick Cheney, after he had a major heart surgery post him being in office, and if you look at if you see what he looks like now compared to how he looked back in 04 or really even 08. It almost doesn't look like the same guy, because it's just somebody who goes through major surgery. Usually there's a huge difference in their complexion, their weight. There's a certain look to someone who's been through serious surgery, and it seems like Jong Un's got basically a similar issue going on, and to see him just come out and be fatter doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I believe the media, and I probably shouldn't have. I probably should be even more skeptical than I am, because if there's something you can learn about the media, and this is something I think that is the reason why the gamer crowd went from being young and rebellious and left wing to being Gamergate right wingers, like the game crowd being demonized as right wing. Some of that is because of basically State JW dogma and taking over of the institutions. Yeah, okay, that definitely obviously occurred. But a lot of it is because of the way the media covered games. Now, before, it used to be kind of the conservative evangelist types mixed with the Tipper Gore types and the Hillary Clinton types. I guess progressive Democrats who wanted to say everybody wants to save the children, and they come down slamming video games and just making up stats and stuff. Your Jack Thompson types, right? And, the Republicans always got blamed for that, because the Republicans, they're old boomers. They don't know what the hell's going on. They just see, images of, prostitutes getting beaten to death. And then somebody says, yeah, kids are doing this. It's like, surprise. But not only, so that was kind of how the default. But then once basically mainstream journalism started covering things, there's that notorious Fox News talking about what was it, Mass Effect 2, and like or I guess maybe it was just Mass Effect 1, whatever it was. It had to do with like the sex scenes in that, and it was like, oh, is it generated pornography or something? And they bring a guest on who's an expert. Now, in fairness to Fox News, they don't know. They're not gamers. They don't know. They're just like, okay, well, this person says they're writing articles for X magazine about it, so they must have some experience. And then they bring on somebody else who's like actually played the game from the industry, and they're like, what the hell are you talking about? You're just making shit up at this point. And we saw countless examples in media of just people saying stuff about games and writing about it and being and something that we knew intimately as gamers. And just shaking our heads and being like, Jesus, how much more inaccurate can the media be, the mainstream media be in reporting this stuff? They can't get basic facts right. They just don't understand. And then you thought about it, and then you realized when you read a story about something you know nothing about, you nod your head and go, oh, okay, I'm learning about this. And very quickly, that right-wing gamer crowd, but really just the gamer crowd, started to have that healthy skepticism in the media, where just because we don't know about it and we're reading about it and we think we're educating ourselves by reading what the media has to say about something, some article about foreign policy or Nigeria or the president or whatever, right? And we read it and we go, oh, I've never heard this before. And then you have to pause, because you realize, you're like, wait a minute. This is how people were reading the articles about the video games and whatnot, and they were nodding and getting outraged and being and really, like, that was informing the general public as to what video games were, right? And luckily, video games were popular enough where essentially its popularity overtook the general population's ignorance of it, so we didn't get hit with major, like Australia got hit. Their government just bans games and stuff. Germany, same thing. But the United States, we didn't get hit with that, because luckily, like, basically the hobby was so widespread that more people were awakened to what the truth was just from having interacted with the actual hobby. So we got lucky in that sense. But in terms of, like, when we read other media articles about, like in this case, I read, the things about what's going on in North Korea. And I go, okay, all right, these articles are saying this, so that there must be truth to this, like, but they might just be completely wrong. They might be completely wrong. And if I go by what the State Department is saying, which is really, we have an unbelievably transparent State Department, which we have never had, at least not in my lifetime. If they don't want to tell you something, they say that they're not telling you that. But when they say something, they're telling the truth. So in this case, when there was like, we're not concerned about this Jong Un stuff because he's alive and fine, I should have just listened to him. I should have just said, you know what, the media is going to say all these things, and I'm just going to go with basically the only group that hasn't been lying to me, which is the State Department, which is insane to think a government agency is the one that's actually more truthful than the independent media. I mean, my God, right? I mean, how far have we fallen if that's the case? So, President comes out and he says, Jong Un's fine, don't underestimate him. So what do I expect to see now? Well, I expect nothing to happen in North Korea. I expect it to be solid. And they're just going to keep talking to the South Koreans and keep talking to the Americans and, basically playing chess with the Chinese, trying to figure out what they can do. They don't want to give up their nukes because the nukes are really their only leverage. Because if they give up the nukes and then the United States were to stab them in the back and say, well, you still get the sanctions, and now we're going to crush you, and you're going to starve to death. That would really suck. and he would be the guy who basically destroyed North Korea, if that was the case, right? So we have a lot of capital to build. There's a lot of trust you have to build basically with these people, with particularly somebody like Jong Un, who just, the Chinese are in his ear saying the Americans, they want to invade you, they want to take your resources, and here like the Chinese are exploiting the mines and stuff, and North Koreans are dying by the thousands in the Chinese run precious metal mines in North Korea. But they're saying that, like, okay, the Americans, they're bullshitting you. They're just going to basically, they want you to give up your nukes so that they can attack you with impunity. And if you're, if that's your card, if that's the most powerful card you have is your nuclear weapons, you're going to hold on to that as hard as you can, because you do not trust anybody. You don't trust the Chinese, but you don't have a necessary reason to trust the South Koreans. You don't necessarily have a reason to trust the Americans. I'm saying this from the North Koreans' perspective. Obviously, President Trump in the United States, we have no desire to get into a hot war with North Korea. But think of it this way. The Chinese have to say, well, the Americans almost elected Hillary Clinton, and that was pretty much a collision course for a hot war with you guys. It seemed like that was going to happen, right? And there's another election coming up. Biden's from the last administration. They're going to go back to their old policies, and they're probably going to end up in a hot war with you, or they're going to be weak strategically, and then you'll get a better deal. So if you're Jong Un, even if you have benevolent intentions, you're still, which I'm not saying the guy does, because he's a dictator, but you're going to probably hold on to your cards at the moment, and wait before you, particularly, you're not going to give up the nukes just yet. You probably are going to hold them. Probably, I suspect North Korea will probably have nuclear weapons for at least another 2 years before I think a proper deal is reached. Believe it or not, these other peace deals and stuff that are going on in the Middle East, the way the State Department's negotiating them, the North Koreans are observing those things. That doesn't go unnoticed. And North Korea's got relationships with other countries that we simply do not have, like Indonesia and like other countries that they're not hostile towards us, but they don't necessarily have a problem with North Korea. Iran being an example, right? And a lot of these Middle Eastern countries, like you can go from North Korea to these Middle Eastern countries, like if you're obviously if you're a government stooge or whatever, but like it's not like a hostile relationship between Bahrain and North Korea. Like Bahrain doesn't give a shit. But they're seeing now that basically Bahrain and Israel are negotiating, where they've come to a peace agreement in good faith with the United States' help, with no military action whatsoever, just a good faith negotiation. And the North Koreans, they see that stuff, and that again, that's a check in the corner of, all right, well, I guess we can trust, at the very least, we can trust Donald Trump. Because you got to remember, he looks at the United States as an idea, but he looks at the person he's negotiating with as Donald Trump. Donald Trump, Mike Pompeo, like that team, that's who he's negotiating with. And when you're negotiating with North Korea, you're not negotiating with North Korea. You're negotiating with Kim Jong Un. That's who you're negotiating with. It's that man. You can't convince the country that this is a good thing. It's just, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what his second in command general thinks. He's the guy who makes the decision at the end of the day. And as far as the North Koreans are concerned, the person they want to hold to the highest integrity is Secretary of State and the President of the United States. He's a dictator. He wants to talk man to man. He doesn't give a shit about the Congress and our political system and Democrats and Republicans and this election shit. He doesn't care. He wants a guarantee where he can get basically the safety he needs, the open economy he needs, and the peace he needs to be able to actually transition his country away from the Soviet hellhole it is. And that Soviet hellhole with nuclear weapons that isn't being invaded by the United States or China is a better deal right now than the risk that he has stepping forward into the next basically the next stage of really where North Korea should be, basically leaving the third world and at least getting to the second world. It's a hard sell. It's not an easy negotiation, particularly when basically Jong Il, his father, was definitely more mental than he was, and he was on an absolute collision course with the United States, the way he was taking things. It looked like that was going to get hot within very short order. In fact, the fact he died and Jong Un took over, and there was that kind of period of chaos within North Korea, and it did work out because like there wasn't a coup. Again, there's always a risk of a coup when there's a power change. That bought the Obama administration a lot of time, because had Jong Il still been alive, we probably before 2012 even, we would have been probably in a hot war with North Korea with the path they were taking. They were going full nukes, full aggro. They wanted more territory. They were shooting at islands. They were doing all kinds of crazy shit. And the South Koreans were getting really spooked, and the Chinese were actually getting spooked by them. Because the Chinese were like, okay, if this hot war breaks out, there's going to be millions of refugees. We're not even ready for this insanity. Since then, they've adjusted. It's been like 10, 15 years. It's been, they've had a lot of time to, 10 years. They've had 10 years to really readjust their strategies. But with this is very, very different and very unique. This is an opportunity we've had with Jong Un that we would not have gotten with any basically the previous two North Korean dictators. We're going to get it with what the hell's the original guy, the original guy from the Korean War. We weren't going to get it with Jong Il, but we might get it with Jong Un. Because it's 2 generations removed, and people are different. It's you're literally playing to the personality of do you think Rommel's grandson's a bad guy? Probably not. You could probably have a conversation with that guy, and he's not going to be interested in invading Czechoslovakia. So there's room for improvement, and we can sometimes just time and space allows us to basically be able to bury the hatchet, because it's like, regardless of what you think your grandfather did to them or their grandfather did to you, you now stand as individuals, and you kind of go, well, what are we gonna do? Kill each other over a disagreement that our forefathers had? It's not. That's just not how. That's not how human beings are. And you can see this in any type of empire or negotiations, and it's generations of time do separate. That in itself can just the time itself defuse even hot wars and cultural differences. Just sometimes it's just generations of time. Where are we going to see Jong Un next? I got a feeling we're going to see him at the White House next. The President of the United States stating unbelievably confidently that Jong Un's in good health and he's recovering. Basically, don't underestimate him. How does he know this so cavalierly? Because even if he knew basically Jong Un was recovering in a safe place in North Korea, because maybe they let the CIA's attaché actually there just because they're again afraid of the Chinese coming in, and the CIA's helping to protect him because they don't want him assassinated while this peace process goes on. Would you really say, oh yeah, everything's good? Because you don't know, because then he could eat a radiation bullet or something, and he'd have egg on his face. But he's saying it so cavalier, and the State Department is so confident about it, and nobody seems to know where the hell he is. Major surgery. He's going to get state of the art. And they're unbelievably confident he's going to recover. And it seems like things were delayed. COVID. I think he's in the United States. If I had to guess, I think Jong Un's in the United States. That's where I think he is. I think he's in a private hospital under a different name or something. He's probably not recognizable. He's probably dressed very Western. he's already kind of a secretive guy. You take the makeup off him and change his hairstyle, he's just gonna look like another fat Korean dude. Like you're not gonna know, right? So he's going in for surgery and doing all this other stuff, and he's recovering, and he's thinning out, and he speaks English. He's been to the United States when he was a kid, like I forget, he went to I think he went to school in Switzerland too. Like he's pretty well traveled. He's not gonna wander out and be confused. Like he could walk down to the 7-Eleven and get food and come back and you wouldn't know, Not saying that he's doing stuff like that, because he's obviously gonna have bodyguards and stuff. But I think there's a good chance he's in the United States. And I have a feeling he's going to, the next time we see him, it's going to be at the White House. It's going to be, oh yeah, there was a meeting, and we're not going to tell you how we did it, but he's here. And we're going to have our photo thing, and we're going to talk, and we're going to say, we're reiterating this. There's some things you can do, though, for us to move the sanctions a little bit. We need you, we need you to cut ties with the Iranians, but then in agreement, we'll sell them the oil for whatever the rate is, like something like that. Where it's like basically like we don't want to screw you, because it's like, yeah, okay, we can tell you, oh yeah, cut your ties with all these bad guys, but it's like that's their lifeblood, The Chinese, because there's like trade issues too. Basically the stuff's manufactured in North Korea, it goes to China, and then Chinese label it as Vietnamese, and they send it out. That's how North Korean products get here. And that's a huge bootleg problem, right? If you're North Korea, you don't want that arrangement. Because that arrangement, first of all, you bleed money. And second of all, you can't enter general world trade lying like that, basically depending on Chinese treachery, essentially, to get your stuff into the market. That makes you 100% basically dependent on the Chinese, and the Chinese willing to cheat to get your stuff in. So if they're looking at us, and they're looking at the West, and we essentially offer them, proper formal trade where they can buy from us, and we're not talking military goods or industrial goods, but like food and certain manufactured products and stuff like that, and then they're able to sell at least some things, maybe it's natural resources or something, like we're able to basically purchase things from them that in good faith, essentially, that we either need or just even as a just like, hey, we'll buy 1 million of your widgets from your fancy widget North Korea factory as a gesture of goodwill, and we'll put them in every government building, right? And it'll be a little trophy, right? And then because the North Koreans are looking, they're like, okay, the buying power of the United States is infinitely larger than the buying power of the Chinese. In fact, the only reason the Chinese buy from the North Koreans is so that they can repackage it and sell it at basically at an undercut cost to the West. So cut out the middleman. If you're North Korea, like if you're Kim Jong Un and you're looking at this, the Chinese have you by the balls. And if you sever that tie by essentially getting a really good deal with the Americans, like trade promises and cash flow, and basically you get that cash link where you're making money, the Americans are making money, the South Koreans are making money, everybody's making peace, and now we're interested in essentially protecting you from the Chinese. Suddenly, that trade-off of giving up your nuclear weapons, that's a pretty damn good trade-off, because you're just graduating from the need of it, because now you don't need your nuclear weapons to protect yourself. Now the Americans' nuclear weapons are essentially protecting you. That's why the South Koreans don't have them. They were saying, oh, we're going to develop it because the North Koreans have it. But then they were like, well, look, if they nuke us, the Americans, they're going to retaliate strategically with nuke. Like if somebody needs to get nuked because they're shooting nukes, the Americans are pretty much going to be the ones who fight back. You just have to be friends with the United States. Like, Estonia, like, if the Russians were, like, shot a nuke at Estonia, like, we would probably nuke the Russians, like, it pays to be friends with the United States, even if it's a country that's kind of neutral. I mean, like, Bahrain, for example, right? Iran fires a nuclear weapon at Bahrain, right? And this little island catches a nuke, or even a dirty bomb. Does Bahrain have to be like, oh my God, why didn't we build our own nuclear weapons program? This is who's going to retaliate? Because they're just going to say, well, all right, Americans, do your thing, because, Iran, you know what the rules are. And it's the same. It's actually the same thing with the United States in a sense too. It's like we're not going to go drop a nuke on, Kazakhstan because we think Kazakhstan are assholes. Because then the Russians and the Chinese are going to be like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And they're going to immediately retaliate. So there's benefits to having nuclear allies that basically, okay, you don't have your full independence, but North Korea is more like they got to feed their people. That's more important than nuclear independence. Being able to be a superpower. They know they're not. Kim Jong Un, unlike I think Kim Jong Il, understands that North Korea is not the almighty, powerhouse of Asia with the strongest army and this huge threat to the world and tough. He understands that they're really only powerful enough to essentially prevent getting. They're powerful enough for the battle to be bloody enough for them to, us not to want to fight them. But they're not powerful enough to somehow one day rise to the level of the Soviet Union. The North Koreans, they were duped essentially. The Chinese took over and they just became a satellite state of Maoist China. And then when China did reforms, well, North Korea was still stuck with the old Mao structure. And the Soviet Union, and China, when they started to split with each other, North Korea suddenly was just getting along for the ride, like, oh, I guess we're getting traded with. But they never restructured. And when the Berlin Wall fell, North Korea didn't get any benefits from that, because they weren't technically under that block. They were under the Chinese thumb. So they, they in their heads they were thought, okay, we're player number 3. We're aspiring. We're going to be just as powerful as China and the Soviet Union. They're rivals, but we're going to be just as we're going to be threat number 3 in Asia. And we're going to surpass them or be as powerful in some point. And that's what they believed for years. And now Jong Un knows that's not the case. It's just, it's with the way communication is. I mean, I'm sure some poor North Korean farmer might probably believe that. But anybody who's, has the internet, basically anybody who's making decisions in North Korea or have been outside of North Korea know, basically the structure that North Korea, there's a bug, the structure that North Korea has chosen, which is this rigid Soviet Maoist style communist, oppression, while not easy to disassemble, and certainly long-lasting, as we've seen, it's not going to get them. It's not going to take them into the future. It's not going to take them forward. They're just going to keep falling more and more and more generations of technology and just culture behind. Where if they don't do something about this, North Korea is going to look like North Korea looks. And the United States is gonna look like Blade Runner, minus the apocalypse. Like the technology is gonna just North Korea. They're just gonna remain. They're gonna remain third world, and they don't want that. I should say Jong Un, at least he doesn't want that. He sees the writing on the wall. He sees basically like, all right, China is exploiting us, and the Americans and South Koreans are giving us a hand up. And if we don't take this now, we're either going to be China's bitch or the Americans don't have to fight us because we're not going to be capable of actually attacking the Americans. When we get weaponized space-based platforms, like this whole like massive North Korean army and artillery, like it's not going to mean anything. 25 years from now, when we have like proper space defense platforms and stuff, it's they can have all the artillery they want. They're going to get obliterated from orbit, and even if they're not even struck from orbit, the amount of communications and eyes on the situation, we're going to be able to fire missiles from ships sitting in the Pacific and destroy the entire North Korean army in minutes. And so basically, they're not going to be a threat. Like they're not going to be able to. The first artillery shell isn't even going to land on Seoul before the U.S. retaliation, with the rate of the technology we're going, is going to be strong enough, and non-nuclear, but like strong enough to wipe out their entire military existence. And they know that's coming. They know that's inevitably coming, and they know that, that, or, the South Koreans will get tired of their shit, and then eventually, when the South Koreans are sufficiently more powerful than them, they're just going to steamroll. These aren't outcomes they want. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see if my prediction comes true about where he is. I really feel like I think he's in the United States. If I had to guess, based on what we've seen, he's in the United States. And if he's not in the United States, I would be surprised if he actually is in North Korea. I mean, he might be in South Korea. I mean, but I don't know. You probably couldn't hide him in South Korea, but you could hide him in the United States. He could be in some hospital in Iowa. How would anybody know? How would anybody know? If they snuck him in, and he was treated in some top-notch facility in Ohio, in Iowa, and then now he's in some log cabin where he's recovering on a lakeside. How would anybody know? I think next time we're going to see him, it's going to be at the White House. That's what I think. And they'll be advancing their deal next. So we'll find out.